Welcome, everyone. You're listening to the ImPerfect Podcast. I'm Kathy.
And I'm Kennedy. Join us on this week's episode as we discuss intriguing topics and people of interest that will inspire us to explore all of the unique pieces of ourselves.
We are all imperfectly perfect.
We're glad you're here. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the ImPerfect Podcast. Have you ever broken something or tried to hide it or throw it away or don't look behind this big inconspicuous thing? Don't pull back the curtain.
Right.
Have you ever done stuff like that?
I can speak on that. It brings to mind time in high school when a friend of mine was having a large party when her parents were not home. Some things got broken, and one of which was a candy dish in the living room. And rather than out herself and her parents to know that we had a party while they were there, we carefully, well, I didn't, but they did.
Just making sure everyone knows.
Replaced the glass top to the candy dish so that it looked okay as long as nobody touched it. So
I wonder who the lucky person was to pick up the, hey, does anyone want a candy?
And I'm pretty sure we would have been found out anyway. So the reason we're talking about this subject today is because we're going to discuss something called kintsugi.
Yeah, that was pretty good. She's been practicing. So kintsugi actually means golden joinery. And for those of you who have no idea what that is or where we're getting at with this, I actually knew what it was once Mom described it like visually to me, which is I've often seen them in museums where there's plates or cups from however long ago in history, where they've repaired a broken plate with, it's got these like golden zigzags in between it all because it was a broken plate and they put it back together. So it literally means golden joinery. And it is the 500-year-old Japanese art technique of putting broken pottery pieces back together. So repairing broken pottery with tree lacquer, dusted or mixed with powdered gold, silver, or platinum.
And it actually is a bit of a process. It's not like gluing it together with gold colored glue. There's the sanding of the rough edges, gluing the pieces together, all the little, imagine if you broke a ceramic plate, how many shards there could be included in that. Also applying the gold, silver, or platinum to the area that was broken, and then polishing the surface of the newly repaired item just to make sure that it looks new and fresh and that it's supposed to be that way. And so there's they're not trying to hide the flaw. Actually, in this case, they're trying to bring attention to it. It's a big process, and it was developed specifically to highlight the damage that occurred.
Yeah, which is strange because the standard of repairing not just ceramics, but anything really is to hide the breakage or the flaw. It's funny, I just had a womb vision in my brain of, remember when you desperately needed a black pair of flats, and we were in a hurry to go somewhere. I don't even know where we were going. And here's my sister and I helping my mother frantically permanent marker color her shoes to hide the flaw of the fact that the color of, anyway, they were secondhand shoes, so they weren't very important, but I just had a flash in front of my eyes. But yeah, the typical way of doing things is, we have to hide the flaw of whatever thing is broken. But in this particular circumstance, it's about, like you said, highlighting the flaws in these items.
Yeah, and I think when the old-fashioned way, I've done it myself, you get the old tube of crazy glue and try to glue the handle back on the mug or whatever. But if it's something that might be a family heirloom or something that has a good memory for you and you're sticking it back together, well, you're thankful that it stuck together and you didn't entirely lose it. But yet every time you look at it, there's that about it, right? So that is always linked to the piece now, and almost like in a shame or a sad sort of way. So a piece that used to bring you joy now may have negative connotations, you know, included with it. Whereas if you use this kintsugi, or however you pronounce that crazy word,
Right.
it actually is going like, hey, look at this big crack in the plate that I fixed with this gold, detail. And it's, yeah.
Glitter glue. Yeah.
So it makes the person more appreciative of the piece, almost like it changes the psychology of the break, I guess.
Right. Because to anyone, like if you broke something, for example, mom, and you placed it on, I don't know, the table for dinner or whatever, to me or to my partner or, my sister or whoever, they may not necessarily notice that flaw, but like what you're saying is that something that you tried to desperately save, this sentimental piece, so that it would still appear as it did before, but now there's a negative connotation for you, even though not everybody else can see the flaw in it. So,
Right.
yeah. And
So
so go ahead.
yeah, we always end up
I know. We're like,
in an episode anxious to talk. I was just going to talk about the three main types of kintsugi.
mm,
Um, there are three types. It's dependent upon the amount of repair required in the particular circumstance. The first one would be something they just call crack, where the gold dust and lacquer are used to join the broken pieces together, like we would typically use glue, I guess.
mm.
There's the piece method, where a missing part of the broken item is replaced entirely by the gold or the lacquer compound. So yeah, if you had a big chunk that maybe, it slid under the fridge and you never found it, then I
Never
guess,
to be seen again.
right, right. And you might have a bigger gold piece in that circumstance. And then there's something called joint call. I'm not sure what that means. Maybe it's a direct translation from the Japanese language. So, it didn't
Probably.
come
Yeah.
through. So that actually means where there was a mismatched piece of another object that was used to join in, where there was a larger piece missing, and then they use the gold or the gold lacquer or the silver to complete the piece.
I think that's the coolest of the three, just because it's very much with the saying, two halves make a whole. It's kind of interesting that something that was seen as nothing because there's too many pieces missing can become something with someone else's added. Anyway, there's a whole
Yeah,
story
and we
behind
have
that.
we have this, like, I mean, in the generation I grew up in, it was more like if something breaks and you're able to, you fix it, or you call a repair person, or whatever, and things were made, I think, to last longer.
That's not at
Um,
all my my age group is
well,
oh, it's broken.
exactly.
Yeah,
Right, right. And there's people out there of my generation that do the same. They just can't be bothered, right? Like, but I grew up where you used everything, all your leftovers in the fridge to make something with. You didn't just toss it, or, if your shirt got a little rip in it, or a button missing, or a sock had a hole, I am capable of doing those small tasks. But yeah, now it's just like it's a throwaway society, right? So this is kind of a little bit of a twist on that. And in making something that had maybe not been a pleasant situation turn it into to good. So it treats the breakage or the piece that you need repaired. It's like intentionally highlighted for the damage, and it becomes whole again and even more special, making it sometimes stronger and something that's more a valued piece.
yeah, rather than making it something to disguise or to hide.
Yeah.
So
The plate that you keep on the bottom that only shows up if, you have to take something else
right,
out.
just need we need a ninth plate. Damn, I guess I'll pull out this broken piece. Yeah.
Right. So, or you could be like, shing,
Yeah.
here's my beautiful gold applique, whatever plate, right?
Oh, misfit toys, yeah. This tradition was built on the idea that in embracing flaws and imperfections, you can create an even stronger, more beautiful piece of art. So every break is unique. And instead of repairing an item like new, the 500-year-old technique actually highlights the scars, as Mom was saying, as a part of the design, which is believed to end up making the piece stronger and more beautiful, valued, and treasured. The one word that really sticks out to me is that every break is unique.
Yeah, and it's the fact that before it was broken, it was just ordinary.
Yeah. The
It was
unique
in the
word
box.
gets me.
It
Yeah.
was in the box with all the other plates, but now that you've actually broken and been repaired and strengthened or more beautified or what have you, that's when the value comes out.
Mm.
Kind of neat, eh? So,
Whoa. Mic drop. Yeah.
yeah. So kintsugi is not only a restorative and exquisite art form, it's also a beautiful life philosophy.
So
And
no joke, we're relating it metaphorically to our show specifically. Mom brought this topic to me and I was like, well, yeah, makes so much sense. The imperfections of, the Imperfect Podcast. So using this as a metaphor for healing ourselves teaches us an important lesson that sometimes in the process of repairing things that have broken, we actually create something more unique, beautiful, and resilient. And going back to what Mom just said about it creates, well, we were saying with uniqueness, but also like you're just ordinary before, and without the breaks, without, the wear and tear and whatever, it doesn't make that piece anything other than just part of the dish set.
right. And the neat thing about it is it can both acknowledge the mistake and allow the person to move on, knowing that it will somehow be what becomes the beautiful part in them, like making them
Yeah.
more individual. Because, we're all born, with the soother in our mouth, and we're
Yep.
pretty much all the same at that point. And then once you hit go, lots of stuff happens, and sometimes bad things happen, and people don't come out of it, or they can't seem to find their way through. And other times you see people get knocked down over and over again and get up and carry on. So um, this whole concept of kintsugi is
Kintsugi is how I see it. Who knows?
however you say that crazy word. Um, Basically, it's really neat. It is exactly what our podcast is talking about.
Yeah, and beyond the plates, beyond the ceramics, beyond everything, kintsugi is actually seen as a way of life. So enthusiasts and artists believe this method is a means to heal past mistakes and traumas by accepting what went wrong. And instead of ignoring our pain or trying to forget, we have to work on it. So kintsugi gives us permission and we can be ourselves and we can transform what was broken, so the brokenness and imperfections, and create beauty throughout that. Like I find that so like
It
poetic.
is,
Like
and
it's
just as you're saying it, I'm thinking like the parallels to someone who is open to looking at where they might have gone wrong in the past. And it's only when, until, what's that old saying? The first step is admitting that you have a problem,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So even if it's not a problem, but maybe you erred, and until you are able to see that, you can't move beyond it and make better choices next time. So just as you were reading through there and discussing those issues, I'm thinking like, that's so true, because if someone isn't able to look at their own mistakes, it creates or look at the broken, okay, so I'm going to line it up here with the pottery example. If you can't look at the pottery and what am I trying to say here? If you look at the pottery and you see that it's broken and there's shame and guilt and bad feelings with that, you can't move on with feeling good about it because you're not willing to see where I'm going with
I
this.
see where you're going, and I'm trying to figure out how to word it differently, and I don't know how I do it any better, honestly.
Can we just press rewind? Start
Right.
over.
I know what you're saying though, but I don't know that there's a better way to say it because I'm sitting here trying to go, how else would you even say that?
It's true. Well, when you're not willing to accept, or often people aren't able to see their own flaws for a number of reasons, but sometimes the number one reason is low self-esteem. They feel that they're less than if they admit that they had made an error. So if they're not able to look at that and see that they made an error and move on from that place, then there's a bunch of shame and negative emotions attached with that. And but if you say like, hey, yeah, here's the gold paint or the
Yeah.
gold procedure, and I did it and I messed up, and how can I fix this for next time? There, is that any more clear?
Yeah, no, and even as you're saying it, I was thinking of a whole other layer to further elaborate to your thought is another big thing metaphorically. The plate is smashed on the floor. And you can either stay a smashed plate and be absolutely useless, or that was kind of harsh. You know what I'm saying? Not be used for its purpose.
Right.
Where you could literally and figuratively pick up the pieces
Yeah.
and build something anew. Or you can stay on the floor and stay a broken plate. And while you're at it and you're dwelling in your brokenness, someone could also come by and step on the broken pieces that are on the floor, and someone might spill something on the floor, and then you might be scattered everywhere. The metaphor just continues to unfold the more I talk. Scattered everywhere, pick up the pieces,
Sounds
step
pretty
on them.
drastic. Let's just glue it together with the tree resin and the
Yeah,
gold instead, and
tree
then we'll be
resin, right?
proud of it, right?
Yeah, but it's so true. There's so much message behind just this art form. We often just don't even realize our full potential until we go through the difficult times, and the kintsugi practice does parallel on how we can come out on the other side and experience what's called post-traumatic growth.
Yeah. That's really interesting. And actually, they believe so much about kintsugi in Japan, it has kind of become a model for some types of counseling. Over here in the West, we have it a difficult time sometimes to see that our painful experiences can actually be used for good. And
Yeah, and to just grow from them. We oftentimes don't even want to acknowledge that um, we can grow from our traumatic experiences. And I think a lot of times people don't want to open that Pandora's box because they're scared that once they do, it'll never close back up again. But they're not looking at the potential that they have of repairing said trauma and perhaps being able to move on from it.
yeah, and I really find that there's a mindset of conventional psychology that it's kind of like the Humpty Dumpty thing. He fell off the wall. All the king's horses and men came to help, but he was a lost cause. So see you
Right.
later.
Right.
And we tend to follow that a lot of times in our mindset that once it's broken and they're doing, oh, what's wrong with her? Oh, she's always been like that. And, instead of looking past what the actual incident is and
I
trying to make positive.
Yeah, I find in our society too, just the mentality beyond that and kind of involving this with the Humpty Dumpty rule you were saying, oh, there's no use, just leave me here. But there's also the side of I find a lot of people when the going gets rough, they just flee. It's like, oh, I have to persevere. I have to push through this hard time to be able to see through to the other side. A lot of people don't experience that because, or haven't given themselves the opportunity to experience that because when things get difficult, I mean, it is scary, but to push through those things and to finally get to the other side and be like, oh, this is what it looks like to have a golden plate.
So the art of I'm not, maybe by the end, kintsugi
Sure, whatever you want to call it.
symbolizes how renewal is possible. So one piece of pottery is repaired, it can actually become stronger. And in the broken places, um, because of this bonding process that's taken place, it is beautiful and more strong. And if you think of the parallels to, if you break a bone and when it repairs, often it becomes stronger in that point. Or stuff like going to the gym,
Mm.
it hurts. And why does it, like, if you're lifting weights, it hurts because you're tearing the little muscle fibers, right? But when they
Yeah.
come back, they're bigger and you have more definition and that sort of thing. So it's sort of the kind of the sort of the kind of the the same thing, that the again, the resilience and the little bit of pain for the longer term gain. Does that, just in life,
Short-term pain for long-term gain.
yeah, something like that.
Yeah, exactly. So the main message of kintsugi as a treatment method is to envision yourself as constantly unfolding into new and improved forms. It is about celebrating imperfections, and kintsugi can shift your worldview from striving for an impossible ideal to a more positive, accepting, and strength-based view of yourself. I just had a bit of a recall to a song. It's a song by Mercy Me, and it's called Dear Younger Me. And excuse me, I'm doing this off the fly here. Just the lyrics say something to the effect of, if I could go back, I'm not going to get the lyrics right, but the message in the lyrics is that if I could go back and tell myself what I've learned so far, would I even do it? Because the imperfections and all of the things that have led up to now have brought me to exactly where I am. And do I even want to know who the version of myself is that didn't experience all of that stuff all this way?
That's a weird thing to think about.
It is, because when you really think about it, I'll have to play the song after. You must have heard it. I've played it 1,000 times, but it's the message is, if I could go back and tell myself all of the stuff I've learned so far to save myself the trouble, would I do it?
Yeah.
I don't know that I would. Like, you think, oh, I've had a lot of crappy things happen to me, but it's made you who you are. You would not be the person you are today without all of those trials and tribulations and, being smashed on the floor. And
So the strength arising from within you becomes
yeah,
the more powerful thing than the negative stuff that's happened to you, I
right.
guess. Yeah. So
And
their concept is, what if, instead of trying to hide all these things that are broken in us or about the plate, and trying to glue it back together and trying to touch it up and paint it and hide the cracks and hope no one notices, which just brings you more shame, right? Because then
mm,
you're feeling that there's something wrong. There's something wrong with the plate. There's something wrong with me. There's something wrong with my relationship or whatever.
right.
And what if, instead of trying to hide it, cover it up, you actually highlight the fractured parts and, admire the beauty and strength that comes from just that in and of itself, and being able to, address things clearer if you're willing to face it head on.
Yeah. And it's very important to highlight as well that some people will choose to fill the cracks with not so nice things. So that can be substance abuse, so drugs, alcohol, any of those things, violence, outbursts of anger.
Yeah.
It can be filled not with gold, so to speak. So it's important to highlight that too, that it's your choice of lacquer, so to speak.
Right. Right.
And one can also make a better choice and add beautiful fillers to the cracks. So comparatively, it just depends on what you're filling the cracks with. So if we grow and learn from life and manage to fill the cracks or gaping holes with gold and any other beautiful colors, you end up more beautiful and strengthened overall with your cracks.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really neat if you think of it that way. And now I'm going to try to remember that from now on. Just, I think I'm pretty good. I feel I'm pretty good with, not having a lot of blind spots. Of course, we've done an episode on that, and we all do have some, but to deal with things that come up as they come up for me is important.
Mm.
But to look at it in parallel to the whole plate imagery that really inspires me.
Yeah, and
Like
just,
Snow Picnic, and
yeah.
it seems to constantly be testing us or breaking us, challenging us, and you know, hopefully we grow from our failures and our tragedies and our traumas. But if we're not acknowledging them and we're not, putting the gold paint on, then there's a certain amount of shame, I think, that's involved in that. And you're potentially missing some opportunities that you could have had growth in.
Yeah, and with the word shame you had mentioned, I was just thinking of this while you were talking. Men and women can relate to this both equally. I immediately think of, because it's comparable in the visual, is stretch marks. And they're not seen as something that people want to have. People want to cover them up. They want to use vitamin E oil to, blur the lines and all of this sort of thing. And to further to that, women, when they're pregnant, and some get stretch marks and some do not, stretch marks are seen as commendable while you're pregnant, but then as soon as baby is out, it's like, oh, I've got to hide these now. Now they're shameful, rather than it's a part of my story and I gave birth to a beautiful baby.
Those are my kintsugi marks.
That's what I'm saying. Like, we're no different than a plate with gold zigzag. You know what I mean? So the main question is what will you fill your cracks with? And will it be something? Okay, stop it. Could have been a nice message, but you had to go and ruin it.
No, well, it just sounds a little bizarre, but I got you.
Anyway, moving on from that, will it be something of beauty or something ugly, like we were mentioning before?
Right. And we'll finish off with a quote from Leonard Cohen. There's a crack in everything, and that's how the light gets in. That's a
Boom.
neat perspective.
Really cool. So thank you so much for tuning in for another episode, and we will be here next week.
Bye.
If you or someone you know has a unique story to tell, we'd love to hear from you. Email us at theimperfectpodcast@outlook.com.
For more information and how to connect with us on social media, you can visit us at our website, theimperfectpodcast.ca.
And from whichever platform you are listening to this episode, be sure to like, share, and leave us a review. We would really appreciate your feedback. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode.
We look forward to hearing your feedback and seeing you all find that extra joy and embrace your own imperfect.
See you next week.